Okay, welcome to Class 10 of Introduction to Flash, and today we're going to talk more about adding sounds to Flash movies. And we're going to talk mostly about sound mixer and stop all. We'll also talk about synchronizing your files when you're working with sound, synchronizing the animation with the sound. Before we go into that, keep in mind that the homework that is due as of midnight tonight is completing the online midterm. And also, of course, last week we had our assignment based on our first knowledge of ActionScripting to be submitted. So those will be up in the gallery this week. So now let's take a look at a little review of working with buttons, some sound basics, and then we're going to go into the sound mixer. So I'm going to switch over to Flash and get out of Dream Movie here. Okay, and let's take a look at what we finished up with last class, which had to do with creating buttons. And just as a quick review, we at this point understand that there are three types of symbols, and we can see in the library representations of all three of those symbols. We have this home text, product copy, and special copy, and that icon indicates that this is a graphic symbol. I can right-click on it, I can go to the Properties panel, and I can see the symbol properties indicates that it's a graphic symbol. The disadvantage of graphic symbols is that we cannot give an instance name to a graphic symbol, and thus we cannot use ActionScript to talk to that symbol directly. We also have movie clips. This is an example of a movie clip symbol. I can go to the Properties panel within the library and see that this is a movie clip. I can also, when that object is on the stage, over here we see I can give an instance name to that movie clip, and by being able to give an instance name to it, we can talk to it directly. So as an example, if I wanted to say MC logo, that's really what that is. I could give it a name and then go over to my Actions panel and go to the Actions and specifically talk to it, say something like MC logo scale X plus equals 2. Okay. MC logo dot scale X plus equal 2. When I test this, we should see that logo being bigger. And there we see along the x-axis that logo is bigger, right? Because we told it to scale along the x-axis. But the point of that was not to review basic action scripting, was just to understand the difference between a graphic symbol and a movie clip, in the sense that graphic symbols do not allow us to give them instance names, whereas movie clips do. The third type of symbol that we have is the button symbol, and the big difference between the button symbol and the movie clip is that if we go into, first of all, we'll just make sure that we see that this is a button symbol, type button, right? The biggest difference between a movie clip and a button symbol is that a button has four keyframes. So if I double click on the symbol and get into the symbol editing mode, you can see that inside of this button I simply have the up state, over, down, and hit states. So a button can also be named, given an instance name, and thus we can use ActionScript to talk to it directly. The rest of the things that we should notice here based on what we reviewed last week before I go into the actions is we've got a labels layer, and the labels layer is a layer that is very good to use when you're going to be setting up navigation within a timeline. We can create keyframes wherever we want on the labels layer and then give a name to that keyframe over here in the labels window. So right here where I've got this keyframe selected, we see up here it says specials, right? And we're using this to navigate to the different screens that appear on the different frames. So this is our home frame, and it says welcome to Talk Shop. This is our products frame, it says products. This is our specials label, and it says weekly specials on the stage. So then we also see that there are just some stop actions put down at the bottom of the screen here, and they're kind of superfluous. We don't really need those because when you look at the actions that we have on the actions panel, it says, the event says go to and stop anyway. So it's already going to stop when we get to those labels. In other words, what I'm saying is that when we click one of these buttons, like for example, if we click the products button, it's going to go to frame 10 where the products label is, and it's going to stop there anyway. So there's no reason to have this stop down over here. I'm going to clear that out. And I'm going to clear this one out as well because those are superfluous and just kind of confuse the matter. So I'm going to remove that keyframe by right-clicking on it and saying clear keyframe. And I'm going to remove this keyframe as well by choosing clear keyframe. And we see back at the very first frame, we could have put the stop action on this layer as well. So it is actually a very bad idea to have two layers with ActionScript on them. So I'm going to actually get rid of this layer altogether. So this is not going to change the functionality of this at all. We've got our actions layer, and we see that, hold on a second. Nice to see you, Tony. We've got our actions layer, and the main thing that we want to be aware of are those concepts that we dealt with last week. The basic functionality inside of Flash has two parts. One is to construct functions, and the second is to listen for events and then trigger or invoke those functions. So we've got this first function, go home, and it's triggered by an event, and then it has :void, which means that it's not going to return any data. And then we have our curly brace, and within the open curly brace and the closed curly brace, there can be a variety of actions. In this case, we don't have any other actions aside to the timeline action, which says go to and stop on a frame, on a label within the timeline. So essentially, each of these functions is a one-step function that simply goes to a frame label in the timeline, except for the last function, which calls a method which is known as the navigate to URL method. Now there's two things here that you might want to be aware of that we didn't really talk about at all last week, and that is that this navigate to URL has this beginning portion which says new space URL request. That means what it's doing is it's constructing a URL request. So it's anytime you see the word new, that's known as a constructor function. So we have new space URL request. So navigate to URL, which is the method, starts with the parameter new URL request, and then in another set of parens puts the URL, the web address, and the web address has to be inside of quotes. So as you can see in this process, the most challenging part is to make sure things are syntactically correct. Well, that's one of the advantages of using the presets. I can go to my window and choose, I'm going to go in Jeff Coder. I thought I had, oh yeah, we've got code snippets. Yeah, okay. I've got my code snippets right over here, and I can choose animation, and we don't want, I can choose action. Yeah, click go to web page, and what I can do is I can see that code, right? And it says instance name here, add event listener, mouse event click, go to web page, and then it shows you the function as well, right? So we see that that entire process of creating that function. I can simply, let's see, I can show the code, and I can drag the code. Yeah, let's just say I clicked on insert here. Oh, let me try that again. Let me just go down here and click go to web page. Oh yeah, it's asking me to select an object on the stage first. So I can select this object. Yep, that's fine. I can select that object. And with that object selected, I can say click go to web page. And it puts that entire block of code in. And once, I'll just get rid of those instructions there. What we see is that it created this event listener on the MC logo button instead of the Learn button. Okay, but the main thing that you want to be aware of is just how nicely it formats the syntax within the function. So you can go and let's say I could take this, I'll just cut it, and I'll go back up here and I'll place it, and then I can customize it according to whichever thing that I wanted to do. So the idea is that you want to use these code snippets to help you, especially in the beginning times of doing ActionScript coding, to make sure that your syntax is correct. And the truth of the matter is, unless you do coding all the time, using the code snippets is really, really helpful, okay? It's just a matter of being able to customize the functions and the event listeners to your own needs. So, in conclusion, the test of this file is we tested with Control-Enter or Command-Return, and we are just going to dismiss this TLF text warning. And we see that we can navigate to the different places within our site using our buttons. So that's the stuff that we covered last week. The final thing we covered last week segues into what we're doing today, which is I demonstrated to you how you can import sounds and then place them on the buttons. So what I'm going to do is select File. Why is it saying File? Oh, Close, because I'm looking at the Swift file. What I'm going to do is choose File, Import, and Import to Library. Prepares the importer. And I'll just import one sound for now. And we see here's the sound that I imported. And I could play it right in this window. Okay. And then I can double click on any of my buttons. I'm now in symbol editing mode. I create a new layer. I drag the keyframe to the down state, which is where I want the sound to occur. And I simply drag the blip onto the button. I'm sorry, onto the stage. And now, when I test the movie, we hear that there's a blip sound on the home button. So it's that easy to both import short sounds into the library and then take those short sounds and drop them onto a new layer within a buttons timeline. Usually it's going to be on the downstate that we hear that sound. There are a lot of good sources for sounds. One source is a place called SoundJax. And you'll see soundjax.com has just a million different sounds, and they're all downloadable, so we can listen to the sound. As an example. So SoundJax, I'll put this link into the chat window, is a really good source for sound files. Okay, so that's really a conclusion of the review that we needed to do for from last week. Now let's talk about adding sounds to your movies. So I'm going to go back to Flash and close this file and talk about what we're going to end up with by the end of this project. So we see, I roll over the button, so basically what you see here is when we roll over each of these buttons, it plays a kind of an annoying sound, and then also plays a sound file that is embedded inside of this production. We see here are the sound files, photo 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you can hear that up in the top. Then we have these different sounds up here, the bloop, the blip, and the background music and the background music wave file, two different versions of that. And we're going to see there's a little problem in here that we're going to have to adjust. So a couple of things that I want to first talk about. Let me just put a little marker in here. Marker. Come on, give me the marker here. Control-Alt-I. Why is the marker not coming up? That's what I was doing. Okay, lesson 11, sounds. So the first thing I want to talk about is the sample rate and the bit depth of sound files that come into Flash. And then we'll talk a little about editing your audios and the difference between mono and audio and stereo sound files. So the first element has to do with the sample rate and the bit depth. So the sample rate refers to the number of samples that are in an audio wave form. And the higher the sample rate, the more samples that are being used. The bit depth determines the amount of information that each sample contains. So think about it like a photograph. If you're looking at a photograph and at 8-bit, which is 256 colors, it's going to look really poor. Whereas if you're looking at a 24-bit, it's going to be just a much better looking file as well, and that's the same thing that's true with audio files. Low bit depth settings such as 8 bits or less produce very poor recordings of limited quality, like a telephone In contrast, 16 bits are sufficient enough for reproducing a wide range of instruments and vocal sounds. So how you would find that information is you would select your file and you would go to the property. You select your file in the library panel and go to the properties, and you can see the sound quality is listed in the properties. It's a 44 kilohertz stereo 16-bit sound. And we can see the size of the file is 631 kilobytes, and that's like a half a meg file. Now that's the uncompressed version of that WAV file. What we will be using when we publish this is this WAV file will be converted to an MP3 file, and it will have its the conversion setting of 16 kilobits per second mono. So it's no longer going to be a sound file. So what we really want to see is a representation within this window of the size of that file after it's compressed. So what we can do is we can go to the compression settings and choose MP3, choose that standard bit rate of 16 kilobits. Now we see that once this is compressed, this half kilobyte or bigger than a half megabyte file is going to get compressed down to 7.2 kilobytes. So it's tiny in comparison. Now there's a couple things you can do. You can hear the quality of the sound right from within this sound window, and based on the quality you can change your publish settings. So that's the first thing I'm going to do with you. I'm looking at that sound property, and I want to make sure that the quality of the sound is going to be sufficient for my production. So I know that by all of the default settings within Flash, my sound files get converted to MP3 files. But really, what I'm going to examine right here is the 16 kilobits per second sound quality good enough? And I have to kind of make some decisions to determine the sound quality versus file size. So I'm going to click on Test. Okay. Now let's try it at 64 kilobits per second, which makes this 28.6 kilobytes. Still a pretty small file, and let's listen to the difference. So if you listen to that, and of course you're listening to it through your speakers on your end, but I can tell you that the highs and the lows, the dynamic range of the sound has increased and improved greatly. Now since there are 6 sounds here, I'm looking at the difference between 21 times 6, about 125 kilobytes. And quite frankly, that's not a problem for me. So I'm going to click on Test one more time, and then I'm going to compare it to the next one down. And I'll keep stepping down. So I hear a major difference when I get down to 16. So I'm going to come back up to 32, and I'm going to click on OK. Now here's the thing. I'm going to leave the compression. I'm going to change the compression back to the default, but I'm going to go into my publish settings and make some adjustments. Because if I go back to the default, you see it's setting it to MP3 16 kilobits mono. So I'm going to click on OK. I'm going to select Edit, File, sorry, Publish Settings. And in my Publish Settings, I'm going to look at my audio stream, which is here, and I'm going to click on that and change this to 32 kilobytes per second. kilobits per second. So that essentially takes all of these WAV files and converts how they're going to be compressed when I publish this movie to my new setting of 32 kilobits per second mono. So that's how we go through that process. So sample and bit depth have a lot to do with your the sound quality. The main thing, though, you want to keep in mind is when you look at the properties panel of an individual file, when you see the number at the top, which tells you the quality of the raw file, this is not the published file settings. Down here, it tells you the published settings, but it would be nice if it gave you feedback in terms of file size right there. In order to see that feedback, you have to essentially go to the MP3 settings, choose the different bit rates that you want to examine, and then you can hear how they sound and see the output file size. Okay? Any questions about that, Tony? Okay, so now what about if we want to edit the audio? You can edit, so Flash has a very limited, okay, good. Flash has a very limited sound editor. It's called the edit envelope, and the way we get to the edit envelope is that when we have an element on the timeline, in the properties panel, we can choose where it says, okay, let me rephrase that. When we have an element on the timeline, we can see that element listed in the properties panel where it says sound. And then next to the word effect, there's a pencil which allows you to get into what's called the edit envelope. There are several controls in the edit envelope that you should examine. You can zoom in, zoom out, so you can see the whole sound. You can view the sound in terms of the number of seconds. In this case, it's 3.5 seconds. Or you can view it in terms of the number of frames. In this case, it's about 115 or 120 frames. So I'm going to leave it on seconds, and I'm going to just play the sound within the edit envelope. Okay, so that's pretty good. I can see there's a tiny bit of flatlining at both the end and at the beginning. So what I can do is I can clip off that beginning and clip off the end, play it again. So basically what you've got when you do that is you've got a little bit more instantaneous response. The other thing that you can do inside of the edit envelope is you can apply an effect. So if you wanted to just hear one channel, or if you want to fade from one channel to the other. So essentially, the sound moved from one speaker to the other. It panned, so you can have basic panning effects. You can fade in. You can fade out. And you can also customize the volume. The way you customize the volume is to simply click on that line at the top, and it creates a marker, and you can put in markers. I mean, you can create wah-wah effects if you wanted to. Pretty straightforward, pretty easily. Okay? So that's your basic edit envelope, and that's something that you want to be aware of. What about the audio file formats and importing sounds into Flash? We already examined how you can import files into Flash, but what I mentioned it last week, and I'll show you real quick that when you import files into Flash, the formats that are available for audio files include AIFF sounds. Okay, start here. It's wave sounds, which is your standard file format for Windows machines. MP3 sound, which has been the kind of de facto standard for the last 15 years, I think. Pardon me. Aside from that, we've also got Adobe Sound Documents, AIFF Sound, which is your standard native file format on the Mac, and then Sun AU files. Okay. Also, you know, if you work with video software, you can always extract the audio track from a video and import it into Flash as well. Okay, so those are the various sounds. And I already showed you how you can add sounds to your button, but if you wanted to add sounds to the timeline, I'm going to show you a little bit of different way than what they did in the book. If I look at my timeline here, we see it says stop sounds, and then it says sounds. Let me take a quick peek at what they're doing up here. Stop sounds. Photo 1, photo 2. Okay. Okay. So this kind of is an important piece to examine, how, the sync and the sound types that are available when you're dealing with the sound. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unlock the stop sound, the sound, and the background music sound layers. And I'm going to stretch out these timelines a bit so we can see this a little clearer. And that's going to wreak havoc with the way the buttons are set up here, but I can undo this in a little bit. Actually, what I would do if I was doing it like this is I would actually select both of these and hit the F5 key, and then both of these, F5, both of these, F5, both of these, F5. I'm just stretching out the timeline so we can actually see the sound in there, and we can actually try a couple of the different approaches. So there are 4 different sound options when you're importing sounds. We see there's no sounds in here, so let me just quickly import those. Actually, one way to do it is, since I've got 2 libraries available here, I can just go to this other library. I can take these sounds, hold the Shift key down, just drag them to the stage for a second, and then remove them. Actually, I have to take, I'm going to pick a specific frame first. Now I'm going to go back to my, yep, there are my sounds. I dropped them on the main timeline. I'll take them off of there in just a second. The idea is that when you put some element on the timeline, it ends up putting it in your library, right? So I'm essentially just, rather than importing, I'm just showing you a different way to do it. I can go to an open library, drag those sounds, and then they show up in my library as well. So I'm going to create a new folder called Sounds. I'm going to put all of my sounds into that folder. And I'm going to go to this frame here and remove the sound from the frame. So now we're back having no sounds on any frame, which is what we wanted for starting purposes. I'm going to add a keyframe out to frame to the end here for the background music. And I'm just going to add a, I'm not going to add any of these layers right now. I'm just going to focus on the sounds, even though we know that there are going to be pictures as we go across. So I'm going to talk about, first of all, something you've already seen, which is inserting a sound on the timeline. So let's say for this very first picture, which has to do with this basis composer, we want that first sound. I selected it, I heard it in my timeline. That's the right sound. So I drag it onto the stage with this layer selected. In my properties panel, I can see there's the sound, it's not repeating, and it's set sync event. So there are four. This brings up the synchronization options. There are four different options that you should be aware of here. There's event, start, stop, and stream. Event sounds have to fully load before they play back, and they respond to events such as the playhead reaching a certain frame, or they also respond to actions, as in the adding sound effects to a button section. Because you want the slideshow, in this case, the narrations, to occur in tandem with the user clicking in the next previous buttons. Be sure you set them to event sounds as you do, as we'll do in just a couple of minutes. Stream sounds work best for long animations, as the audio is matched to the playback, like a soundtrack. A continuous sound, such as a soundtrack or a continuous piece of dialogue that needs to sync with the timeline from start to finish, would be set to a stream sound. One of the advantages of a stream sound is that it will start to play, even if it's a large file. It streams. It actually doesn't stream, but it progressively downloads from the from wherever the file is located. It progressively downloads to the end user's machine. So even if it's a very long file, once there's a little bit of a buffer or cache of sound, it will start playing within a few seconds of being downloaded. Then there's start and stop. Start plays a sound so that no other instance of the same sound can be played at the same time. And this makes start sounds great choices if you want to prevent overlap, right? A start sound will play all the way through to the end and can only be stopped by an instance of the same sound whose sync is set to stop. Stop sounds don't play a sound, but rather stop a specific sound. So that's the structure that we're going to follow now. So first we're going to drop in all of our opening sounds, and we see that they're all going to be set to sync. I'm sorry, they're all going to be set to sync to event. I go to photo 2, photo 3, try photo 3 again. Oh, there it is, never mind. Photo 4, photo 5, and photo 6. And just one other thing I'm going to show you here. I can change the height of my layers. And specifically when it comes to sound, I often do this. That just did it to the folder, not to the sound. I'm going to undo that. Set this back to 100%. But I'll show you on this sound layer that we've already been putting sounds on. I can change the height of a sound layer so I can really see what's happening within that timeline. And we can see if there's any dead time in there. I can see, for example, in the second one, there seems to be some dead time. So I might go look at my timeline and determine that I need to edit my audio envelope and clip off some dead time. And then click on OK. And you see that updates within that timeline how nicely the time is being used. I see the same thing is happening on photo 5. So I clip off the ends and the beginnings, and being more efficient in terms of the usage of the timeline vis-a-vis the sound. Okay? So I see also a more accurate representation of how long that sound lasts. Okay? So each of these sounds is set to synchronize event. The problem with that is if the person with event sounds, if somebody pushes the button, what will happen is that if they push it twice, the sound's going to overlap. Okay? So what I want to do is I want to put the same sound that I want to have stopped when another sound starts, I want to put that same sound onto my timeline and set its synchronization to stop. So I'm going to drag photo 1 onto that second frame. Now that's locked. There we go. I'll drag photo 1 onto that second frame and set its synchronization to stop. Okay, and I go through that same process with photo 2, photo 3, photo 4, and photo 5. And then I go through the process of making sure synchronization is set to stop for each of those. And you see what it does, again, in the timeline, it gives me a visual representation of what's happening, that the sound is not playing there, the sound is actually stopping there. So we've got 2 of our sounds in. What about the background music? I select my background music layer. I choose background music, and in this case, I'm going to choose, I'm going to look at something that they have in the Actions panel here first. Okay, it doesn't talk about it here. I'm going to choose background music .mp3. It doesn't really matter. I'll just choose the first frame, and I'll just drop the background music onto the stage. And I'm going to set its synchronization to stream. Okay? So streaming events also play at a different quality than the other events. And again, this is something that we can adjust in 2 ways. One, we can listen to the sound by right-clicking in the library, choosing Properties, and clicking Test. Then we can experiment with different compressions, and I suggest that you stick with the MP3 variation. We know that this is going to, by default, compress at 64 kilobits per second, which is a higher level of, a higher quality than the event compression. In other words, when Flash publishes a movie, it sets a different audio compression for event synchronizations versus stream synchronizations. So I can determine what I like and then make the adjustments as per necessary. So in this timeline, we have used 3 different types of synchronizations. We've used stream synchronizations for our background music because we wanted to start playing very quickly, even though it's a long file. We're using event synchronizations, which are fine for short sounds because the entire sound has to download first. And then we're using stop synchronizations to make sure that this sound stops before this sound starts. And we have to make sure that if we put our event synchronizations file that's going to start here, and the next event synchronization starts here, we have to put the stop synchronization attached to this same sound name. We put that stop synchronization here so it doesn't overlap with this new one. Okay, now I'm going to delete these extra frames. Shift F5 is the way we do that. Sometimes when you click and drag, you find some problems happen. I know everybody's had that happen. And we'll try it again. Shift F5. It works to go backwards when you're clicking and dragging rather than starting with the keyframe. Uh-oh. Yep, it did that. Be careful. Shift F5. And then click and drag. If you click release and then drag, it causes things to move around. Okay, so we're back to just the minimal number of frames that we see right over here. And I can test this movie right now, and let's see what happens. Okay. So we heard the event, but we didn't hear the background music. So let's take a look at what our timeline says in relationship to that. Doesn't have any information about that at this point. So let's go in and we looked at the trimming. We want to take a look at this background music sound, why it's not playing. First of all, let's try playing it here. Okay, so part of the reason, first of all, it sounds awful, but part of the reason is that it's got a serious delay. So we're going to go into its envelope, select it, click Edit Envelope, zoom out, and we see it's got a almost 3-second delay. And remove that delay, save this, turn the volume down a little, test it, Control Enter or Return. Huh. Okay. It should be streaming in. It's not repeating. Set to play once. Let's do a little quick experiment here. Oh, yes. Good. I'm glad I just screwed up long enough for you to see a typical problem. So the one issue with setting the background music to stream is that when you're streaming, your timeline has to match the number of frames in the sound. Okay? So if I stretch this timeline out to, I don't know, this sound, it should tell me somewhere near how many frames this would last. Let's see. Properties. It's 28.7 seconds, so I can figure out based on my frame rate that my frame rate is, where's my frame rate? Why is it not showing it here? Let's go, oh, because I'm in Swift View mode. I'm still not seeing it, so I'm just going to look here. And I can see it's 30 frames per second, and this is 24. It's almost 900 frames. So I'd have to stretch this out 900 frames in order for this sound to properly stream in, right? So we're going to use a different approach. I'm just going to stretch it out here for a second so you can see what would happen. And we can see there's the sound file. All right. So I'll hit play. And the reason, again, that it's not playing is because we have a stop action on the first frame. So whereas this type of event, synchronization stream, requires the sound synchronization, it requires the timeline to be playing, for just our test purposes right now, we're going to change this to event. And it's taking its little time to load up, but it will. Synchronization event, effect none. I don't know why that's not playing right now. I'm not going to worry about that. This is not the method we're going to be using anyway. But it would be nice if I could figure that out. I'll have to do that during break and then come back and share with you what's going on. So we've looked at trimming some of our sounds. We've looked at basically how, let's take a look here really quickly, how we would put on these buttons some sounds. I'm going to lock down, I'm going to get rid of the sound on this background music layer because we're going to actually do it differently. So I'm going to remove that. I just want to test for a second what happens if I put an MP3 on there. and edit its sound envelope, which requires me to zoom out and pull this in. Click on OK. Set its event to synchronization to event, and then OK. Okay, so that worked. Let's see in test movie mode. But in test movie mode, yeah, there it goes. Okay, it's kind of a really annoying sound, but for some reason there's something corrupt with there is a stop on the first frame, and I put that in earlier before you came into the room, Tony. But we can see that this synchronization set to event is working. I'm going to actually pull that sound right off, because we're going to do a different way of handling the sound anyway. Okay, I'm going to change this back to single frame. This timeline, there we go. And let's now take a look at how we can deal with these buttons. So I'm going to lock the sound layers are now locked. I've got my photos. I'm going to go to my stage graphics, and we see I've got my buttons right there. So I'm going to select this button. I'm going to double click on it, and I see I've already got a sound layer set up, which has up, over, down, and hit state. Now, since it's the sound layer, I don't need any keyframe on the hit state. That's coming from the layer 1, which is the shape. All I do need is I need a sound on the down state. I don't like the sound that they had on the overstate. I think it's kind of annoying. So now where are my items? They also disappeared. Wait, there they are. I'll take the blip. Let's see if it's the blip sound we want, or the bloop sound. They're both we'll do the blip. So we've got the blip on the next button, and maybe we'll select the the previous. Oh yeah, that was the next button. Okay, yeah, because this is instances of the same button. Okay, it's called, as a matter of fact, it's an instance of the next underscore previous button. So we're using two different buttons. The difference is that our naming convention for the instances is this one is called prev underscore btn, and this one is called next underscore btn. So if we test this now, when we click each button, everything's working. As a matter of fact, the nice thing is that the sound before it, if we click twice, the stop action on the sound layer that we called stop sounds will stop the previous sound from playing. So if I click here, so it doesn't allow for overlap, which is very important when you're setting up your directory, your timeline structure. The last thing that we want to look at before controlling sounds, and we're going to actually control sounds with the sound mixer. We're going to do that right after a break. But the last thing I want to show you is how you can use a very nice little built-in Flash action called where is it? Prev frame and next frame. So prev frame and next frame are two different methods that essentially allow you to step forward to the very next frame, and it enables you to, instead of here how I can move this thing around. Basically, because of the fact that we have 6 different photos, right? And we're using a single instance of each of these buttons, we wouldn't be able to say go to this label, now go to this label, now go to this label, now go to this label. Instead, we get to use the prev frame and next frame action. And the next frame action simply says, send the playback head to the next frame. And that's why this timeline is set up so you only have 6 frames. The same thing is true with the prev frame. It sends, when you click on this button, we have an event listener that runs the function called prev photo, which triggers the action prev frame. Just like the next button runs the function called next photo, which triggers the action or method, actually, next frame. Okay, so basically we've got 2 very simple functions and 2 very simple event listeners that are being triggered by clicking on those buttons and then invoke the 2 functions that we see written above. So you might think, well, this is great for reusing those buttons over and over again, but what if you wanted to have animations occur in between each of those? You wouldn't really, it would be tricky to do that with a single frame. First of all, you could get around that by putting movie clips that would do all the animation, so you can still use a single frame. But even if you wanted to use multiple frames, you can have the function next frame, for example, go to the next frame, and then on the next frame's timeline, it can say go to and stop, and then it goes out 30, 50, however many frames you want. So you're not limited by the prev frame and next frame functions in any ways. Okay, so of course at this point when we test this, waiting for my screen to respond. We see the screen. I click on this. I'm going to hear the bloop sound. It goes next frame, plays the next sound. There's definitely a lag happening here for some reason. Maybe it's having to do with my screen sharing. Now we should be hearing Leslie Graves. There it goes. So I'm having some lag time, and we already checked. We know that these sound envelopes are tight. So I'm not sure exactly why that lag is. It's probably just resources on my machine are getting laggy. Okay? So that's your basic setup. All that's left for us to do is to, we've done our repeating sounds, we've done our if we want any sound to repeat or to loop, etc., we've done all that. But the last thing we're going to do is we're going to do something which allows us to use some ActionScript, and by the use of the ActionScript, rather than have the sound even present on the timeline, we can use the sound being held outside of the Flash file altogether, and eliminates the need to put it on the timeline, and you'll see how easy it is to use a basic sound mixer effect. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. We'll come back and we'll do our sound mixer, and that will wrap it up for today. I'm going to pause this recording. Control-Shift-I, using sound mixer. Okay, so we're back and we're talking about sound files. And sorry, my throat's just a bit scratchy here. I'm going to drink a little bit of water. Hold on just one second. Sorry about that. So basically, there's some functions inside of Flash that are important to play with, and one of them is called the sound mixer. And the sound mixer is a class that is similar to any other class, like the movie class or the button class, that has a bunch of methods and properties associated with it. And it's like a mixer that you would see in an audio studio. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in the sound mixer here. And when I hit the dot and I put in stop all, I'm putting in a method that essentially makes sure that any sound that's playing is stopped when I click on the previous button. So this sound mixer stop all, essentially what that does is it stops any sound from playing. Now the downside to that is that it would have the unintended consequence of, let's say, if you had a background music sound also that was on, for example, the timeline at the beginning, the background music timeline, it would stop that from playing. So let's just see that in action here. I've got that timeline on. I've got that element on my timeline. Okay, that's super loud and annoying. I'm turning the volume down. But when I hit this button, it stops that sound from playing also. And it essentially stops all of the sounds. So whereas the sound mixer has the great ability to stop everything, it has unintended consequences. So first of all, to find out the different methods and properties of the sound mixer, you select the word sound mixer, you click on the question mark, and it takes you to the sound mixer page within the Adobe help files. And it shows you, it will talk to you about the amount of buffer time that can be set up, the sound transform property, which allows you to control volume, panning, speaker assignment, etc. There are a variety of methods. The stop all method, which is the one I was just showing you here, and basically this stops all sounds from currently playing. And when using this property, you have to understand that it calls the sound mixer. The stop all method stops only the sounds in the same security sandbox as the one you're currently in. So those are some of the properties and elements associated with the sound mixer. And what we're going to do now is look at how we can, instead of playing that sound on the main timeline, that background sound, what we're going to do instead is we're going to externalize the sound and still play it. So I'm going to remove these the sound mixer elements here, because usually what happens with the background sound is you want it to play when when a function starts. So what we're going to do is we're going to select, I'm going to go out of the Swift here, I'm going to select this next button, and I'm going to go to my code snippets, and I'm going to choose where it says click to play or stop a sound. And I double click on that, and it puts that code on the timeline, and it attaches it to the next button. So let's see what it says exactly, and we're going to tweak it so it's usable for us. So the click to play stop sound preset, and when you click on a symbol instance, it plays a specified sound. When you click on the symbol instance a second time, it stops the sound. So normally what we would do with this is we would do something a little different, and I'm actually going to redo this, is to play the background music. So I'm going to take this off the timeline, and I'm going to customize our file just a little bit in a way that would be normally more common. And I'm going to do that by choosing my buttons layer, going to my window, common library, choose buttons, take a quick peek at what I've got here in the button presets that might match what we've got going on here. That color scheme looks fine. And basically I just want a play and stop button, right? And it should really be generic, because when we click on it twice, it would one would stop it and one would start it. So I want it to be even more generic than that. Let's see what we can find. Okay, that's pretty generic, but it's not really what we're looking for here. Let's just find something useful. Oh, this gray will be fine. So I'm going to choose this button, put it on my screen. I'm going to make it a little bigger. A little too big. Okay, I'm going to double click on it. Oh, why are we hearing that background music? Okay, I thought I took the background music off. Let me go here. There's my layer, properties, remove that background music. Okay, now we go to this enter button. We double click on it and we find our text, which is right there. Let me zoom in a little bit here. I choose my text tool. Oh, this is locked. There we go. That is unlocked. There's my text. Double click on it and say background. Let's say we don't have enough room here, so I'm going to say BG on off. And of course we wouldn't, I wouldn't write it like that if I was going to really be doing this. I would actually change the functionality and make a conditional statement that swapped out two buttons, which would take a little time to figure out right now, so I'm not going to do that. But instead, I'm just going to put this button on the stage and view this in normal size, okay, and move this down. And basically, we see there's this button here that says BG, on, off, okay? So aside from the sound looking the way it does, let's take this background music layer off of here, because we're not going to need that anymore. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to give the end user the option to have background music if they want to, or not. So with that button selected, I go to my code snippets. I choose click to play stop sound. I double click on it, and it's saying, well, this button that you just created needs a symbol name, and that's good. Thank you for reminding me of that. So I'll say BG_BTN. And now we have this function and event listener that's been added to my timeline. So I'm going to take out this code commenting here, and we see it says, I'll leave the order the way it is. Usually I like to have the function first and the event listener afterwards, and I'll do that because I want this to make sense in terms of how we read it to understand it. So basically what's happening here is several events that we need to understand. First of all, we have to create, what we're doing here is we're going to play the sound from outside of the Flash file. This is very useful because it protects your sounds. So even if somebody downloads your Flash player, they don't get, even if they download your Swift file, like let's say you create an MP3 setup, an MP3 player. Even if they download your MP3 player, they're not getting your audio files. So many artists have links to MP3 files, and then people use it for whatever they want. So you get a little bit more intellectual property protection doing it this way. So the steps are creating a variable, okay? And in this case, we're creating a sound. The type of variable we're creating is the first step in externalizing your sound file, which is creating a variable that is a specific data type, and it's the sound channel data type. So I'm going to rename this BG. That's my variable name. So this is our variable name, and this next variable is choosing whether the sound is played or not. And I'm going to call it on_off. So I've created two variables. One creates the sound channel. One is essentially a checker to see if we want the sound to play or stop, depending upon what's been clicked. Okay, so that being the case, that last one was, the first one was, oh, and then there's a function. Okay, so let me go remember these names. F to play and FLC, F to play. Okay, I think I've got it. Okay, and now this function, which is click to play stop sound _3, which is certainly a long one. I'm going to call it play stop. What was the original name? Click to play stop sound. Let me review this one more time. Okay, let me read through this and then we can change the names. So we have our sound channel created. We've got our variable which is set to start that the sound, assume that the sound is already playing, okay? And set it up that by default the sound is playing. That's this variable FL to play. It's a data type. The variable is data typed to a Boolean variable which only has two values, true and false. True meaning that the sound is playing, or the variable, whatever it is on. Okay? Then we create a function that's listening for a mouse event, and there's a conditional statement in the function. Now we haven't studied conditional statements yet, but this is a perfect place to do it. We have a conditional statement is basically a light switch in a lot of ways. A simple if statement is a light switch. If the lights are off, turn them on. If they're on, turn them off. Or more simple, another way to look at it is, if the light is green, then go. Else, if the light is red, then stop. It is a series of evaluations. You check the condition of something, and once you determine the condition of it, you choose to act in a certain way. So we see here that it says if this variable is set to whatever it is, whether it be true or false, but right now it's set to true. If this variable is set to true, create a variable called sound. Make a new sound object. Like I said earlier during class, when we saw the new URL request, this is what's called a constructor function. And when you're externalizing sounds, you have to construct the sound element. And actually, if you have multiple sounds, you have to construct multiple sound elements. In this case, we're creating a single variable called S, and we're data typing it to the sound data type. So here we see we've got 1, 2, 3 variables all data typed to different classes of objects. Okay, so that handout that I posted a couple of weeks ago, which talked about variables and talked about data types, can help you with understanding how these elements connect. So back to our conditional statement. It says if this sound is playing, if this, actually it doesn't say sound is playing, if this variable is set to true, which is how it starts, create the sound object, and this is the constructor function, a new sound, and then send a URL request to where that sound is located in your files. Now, in this case, our new URL request is going to be different than this. It's going to be something stored locally. So first thing I'd have to do is I'd have to first, this is a very big important part for you to understand. The only kind of sound that can stream inside of Flash is an MP3 file. If you look at the final version of their end file, they're pointing to an MP3 file, sounds underscore / background music.mp3, right? The problem with that is that that sound doesn't exist in the folder that they're pointing to. So if I say import and then I look in that sounds folder, I see background music.wave. First of all, background music has a space in it. That would not work here. And there is no background music.mp3 file in here. So what we'd have to do is we'd have to turn this background music.wave file into an MP3 file. Now you will notice in the library you have this background music.mp3 file here, and I can choose to edit this with Audition, but we see it says background music.mp3 does not exist, unable to launch external editor. To fix the link to the external media file, click the update button in the library. So this file has been embedded in this project but was never put into the sound library, which is problematic here. So we can see if I choose import, we see that sound doesn't show up here, right? So that sound doesn't exist outside of this movie, and there's no way to directly extract this here. I might be able to try this. I'm going to see if I can do this. Copy, and I'm going to launch Audition really fast if I can find it. And then save it out as a MP3 file. I could also do this with Audacity, which is a free open source program. File, new, audio file, and click on paste. Edit. No, there's no paste option here. So here's what I can do. I can go open and point to that file. Choose open, and I can see the sound file starts there. I'll just export it just like this. I'll say File, and I could say Save As, and I could save it out as an MP3, and I'll click on OK, and I'll just save it right now. That's the main thing I'm trying to do. Now I can exit the program, go back to that folder first. Let me just see if it's there. And there's background music.mp3. But I have to change the file name and get rid of that space. So I need to go into that folder, because the problem with how they set up this project is they didn't give you the necessary files. That's a problem to start with. And then there's a space in that file name. So get rid of that space. And now I can close this. Okay, now I'm just going to take this little snippet right here and go back to my file and re-examine what we have here. Basically, it says var, create a variable, name it S for sound. It's a data type to sound. Construct the sound object and point to that sound. We're pointing to that sound right now. And it's in the sounds folder. It's called backgroundmusic.mp3. Now, one thing that people, when they first start programming, get very confused about the number of parentheses. The number of parentheses that open have to equal to the number of parentheses that close. So when we create this variable called S and construct a new sound, and then the parameter is new URL request, the new URL request, it then has its own set of parentheses inside of it. So the parameter new URL request actually needs 2 parens at the end to close it. And then we say if this flash to play 3 variable exists as true, then play the sound. If it exists as false, then stop the sound. That's basically what it's doing here. But it's doing one other thing with this little statement right here. And essentially it's flipping it. Because if it's true, play the sound. Else, if it's false, stop the sound. But it's never going to stop the sound. It's never going to play the sound unless the sound has already been, well, it starts playing. But it's never going to stop the sound unless the sound is playing. And it's never going to replay the sound unless the sound is stopped. So what this does right here is it flips the value of the variable. So if this is true, when it starts playing the sound, it sets Boolean true to Boolean false. Is not equal to. That's not equal to. Okay? So that's what that assignment operator is saying. It's saying set the Boolean value of true not equal to true, which means that it's false. Right? And then when it's false, set the Boolean value of false to not equal to false, which means that it's now true. Okay, it sounds complicated, but it's not really that complicated. So I'm going to change a couple of things here just to make this a little easier for us. I'm going to go actually edit, find and replace, because I want the names to be more descriptive. Okay, and I'm going to find the text FL underscore to play underscore 3 and change those to BG sound, because that's what I'm trying to keep in mind. And I replace all of those. That's good. And now I'm creating this sound channel, right? And I'm going to call this sound, we can't call it sound channel. Let's just call it, and we can't call it sound. We can call it music. It's the music sound channel. var is music. So what we want to do now is find SC underscore 3, replace it with music. So why I'm having you do this is because when you create variables that perhaps have some complication to them, the naming of the variables to something that makes sense to you helps you understand what's going on with that variable. So now we have created a variable called music, which is a sound channel, and then we've created a variable called background sound, and this should really be called sound playing. So let's change that to sound underscore playing. Okay, and let's take DG underscore sound and change it to sound underscore playing. Replace all. Okay, and then we have this last, we have the function itself, which is really the start-stop function, right? Let's take that, copy it, paste it over here, and call it start-stop, because that's really what it's doing, right? So now let's look at our script, and this makes a lot more sense in terms of understanding what's going on. So we create a music sound channel. We then create a test to see if the sound is playing. We create another variable, and the variable is designed to test whether the sound is playing or not. Now we have to create the function. What do we do when the sound is started or stopped? So this function is more complicated than the ones we've done up until now. This gives us more than one action. This allows us to test the condition of a sound, or test the condition of an element, and determine what to do once we know the condition of that element. And it's saying if this element sound playing is set to true, which is how it starts, create the variable called S, which is the sound, and it's a new sound construction. And this sound here, the sound class is uppercase. It's very important to remember that. And we have to point to where that, now that we constructed that sound, where do we get the sound? Well, let's request that sound from a folder that we have it stored in. And now let's set music, which is that sound channel, let's set music, assign sound to be playing, right? So this play function is one of the it's not a function. This play method is one of the various methods that we can find in the sound class. Again, to find the other methods of the sound class, we select the word, we click on the help file. It sends us to the sound page within Flash, and we can then scroll down to see not only the properties, but the methods, the events, and the various property details. We can determine the bytes loaded, the bytes total. This is really how, once we understand how to work with these methods and properties here, we can create MP3 players and have these elements stream in. Okay, but back to that sound file. We say that, yeah, it starts with this variable sound playing set to true. So the file actually starts. And then what we do is music is set to play. Else we turn the music off, and we flip the value of the variable from on to off, essentially, from true to false. That's what we're doing, flipping the variable from true to false. The last thing we see is that background button is listening for a mouse event click, and we can shorten this just to the word click. Okay, and when it's clicked on, run the function start to stop, which tests to see the current state of the background music. And the great thing about this is that it's really a seamless way to go forward here. And let's take a look at it working. Okay, and I can go to the next, but I want the music now. And the music's going to come in. There it goes. Okay, so we hit the background music. Now, it's not pleasant background music, I grant you, but it's playing. And we click here, and it shuts. Play it again, and we have a little time lag because the beginning of that file is empty, right? But now we have background music that we're turning on, and we're turning it off, and we're controlling it externally. We're controlling the file that is not residing within the Flash folder, which is very important for MP3 players, not only to protect your property, but also to limit the size of your file. Okay? Any questions about that? Is there a browse function in the action window to replace the URL in the code snippet? No. Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? There's some, you know, when you get a bunch of engineers and not enough usability professionals working on a piece of software, then we don't get those things that would seem pretty darn basic. And that's the case here. Sounds are always, well, I would suggest that you always create a sounds folder when you have a project. And of course, the key here is that you have to upload the entire project in order for any external elements within that project to work. That's what we're going to be doing for our final project, is working with external elements extensively. So the importance of directory structure is very big in that final project, making sure that your directory structure is named properly and you have the right paths to all the files. So what I'm going to finish up with is I'm going to talk about the homework. Okay, so we've talked about the various methods of working with sounds. I'm going to post a very short video on externalizing sounds the way we did with this project, and that should be up by like tomorrow. Right now, I'm going to close that window and go to our homework page, which is right here. And this is an assignment that you have 2 weeks for. I'm just going to touch on it right now. It comes with a start file that we see right here. And the way this file works, when I publish it, is it's just running like that. The idea is that you are going to follow the instructions on the instruction page to be able to use these tabs and swap out the images that show up here. So if I go to the instructions page, you'll see that this project focuses on what we've just started to use over the last 2 weeks, mouse events, right? So suppose you want to create a Flash project that's organized with tabs. We're going to use the ActionScript programming tools to use mouse events to control that. And we're also going to use some if-else conditional statements to control those tabs' behaviors. Okay, and you see that all of the instructions are set up here, so I don't need to go over them with you because it's all pretty much spelled out in all of these pages here. But the main thing you want to keep remembering is how the ActionScript code is case sensitive, and how we're going to be working with movie clips. And basically, you'll see at the very end of these instructions, let's see, we see it at the end, if there's an end picture. No, there's no end picture. The only thing that I have to change on these instructions is where it says post to the gallery, you're going to upload to the Dropbox. So here it's not post to the gallery, it's upload to the Dropbox. But I'll make that change and post that correction. But you'll see it's a really straightforward project. The biggest thing that you're going to be very you're going to need to pay close attention to is your coding. And this is where we're going. We're going to be using these functions are very straightforward functions. They use this set of conditional statements that is very similar to the conditional statements that I just showed you with that sound mixer. Okay, so get started on that. You do have 2 weeks to work on that assignment, so I wouldn't worry too much about that, but do get started on that as soon as possible. So that's a wrap for today. Tony, any questions from you? Okay, thank you.